Coming up today on the Locked On Hornets podcast, who's the new guy? Jeff Peterson, already hard at work hiring people a part of his staff. And my next question is, are the Charlotte Hornets really just becoming the Atlanta Hawks? We'll talk about all of that today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to, but faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. As you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, no Doug Branson. He should be joining us once again on Monday. And so it's just going to be me going solo dolo one more time. Now, I think with this new software that I'm working out today, I'm hoping to avoid any problems. We all know when I go solo, there's going to be a tech issue. In fact, to be quite honest with you, I've already had a couple before I even started. But once we get into a flow, I'm hoping that it all works out. Just hold on with me for a little bit with the tech stuff. As crazy as Doug is, he's quite smart with the behind the scenes stuff. So me, not so much. I'm just the attempt at a pretty face and then also bringing you the takes. So I'm going to try to do that and be the Renaissance man, such as Doug Branson is. So we're going to bring you an episode about a new hire that the new EVP of basketball ops has already made within just a couple of days on the job. And he's going back to a familiar place. We'll get to that in just a moment. But Rod Boone, I believe Woj had the news first, but Rod Boone of the Charlotte Observer also reporting as well that the Hornets are hiring Atlanta's Dotun Akinwale. I'm hoping I'm getting that right. Dotun Akinwale, Akinwale, as the assistant general manager, making him the first hire on Jeff Peterson's staff, league sources confirmed. That's a tweet from Rod Boone's Twitter account at Rod Boone. He also tweets out Akinwale was the vice president of player personnel for the Atlanta Hawks, receiving the promotion to that role last summer. And so, who is this guy? Who is Dotun Akinwale? Well, Jeff Peterson certainly has familiarity because they both work together in the Atlanta Hawks organization. And it's his 12th year in the league. He got his start with the Orlando Magic, but was with the Atlanta Hawks for most of his time. And in fact, if you go to atlantahawks.com, a part of NBA.com, of course, Akinwale Jr. is in his 11th NBA season and 9th with the Hawks. This was last year. And so it's his 12th season. And he joined the club in 2015. He served as a manager of scouting, director of scouting, and senior director of player personnel. He came to Atlanta from the Magic, where he was a basketball operations coordinator after starting as an intern. Akinwale Jr. played collegiately at Thiel College in Pennsylvania. Thiel, maybe? Yeah, everything is messing me up today. Where he earned a degree in business administration. He is a native of Germantown, Maryland. So a couple things here. One, both former players in Jeff Peterson and Akinwale Jr. So that's not always the case. You would think most of these decision makers have some background in basketball, but that's not always the case. And so both of these guys, at least having played college basketball within the last 20 years, seemingly relatively young too, which is another thing to take note of here with Akinwale getting his start just 12 years ago. It's a good mix, right? Younger, but you have some NBA experience, just as Jeff Peterson has here. And with Akinwale Jr. having a background in the scouting department, I actually really like that. One, because you're assistant general manager. We'll see if Jeff Peterson decides to hire a GM. I would imagine so. You don't have that on the staff right now. And so you're going for the assistant GM before you go for the actual GM. As long as Jeff Peterson is the one that is the chief basketball decision maker, such as Rick Schnall and Gabe Plotkin emphasized in the introductory press conference, then that's fine. Usually you would think it's the other way around. Hire the GM hires the assistant GM, but it doesn't matter. Peterson deciding to just bring Akinwale Jr. into the fold as soon as possible. But I like him having a scouting background. So if that's the case, then I'm hoping that this is someone that has already learned a lot about the NBA draft. You can be drafting players for 30, 40, 50 years and still never figure it out to the point where you never have a miss. But it's just important to learn from some of the misses and feel and figure out why you got it right on some of your hits. And so the fact that this is somebody that is younger but has the experience, having the best of both worlds there, I like this guy coming from the scouting department, because if you build through the draft, then you're going to be set up for success, and you can absolutely exercise those other channels to have a team get better. But the draft is the most important. Cost controlled salaries, having these guys come into the building and having the inside track to sign them once they get to their second and third year contract, it matters, right? We all understand this. It's also impressive because I think Jeff Peterson gets that too. I think he puts that as high priority, as a lot of GMs do. But when you go back to the Woj pod and listen to Jeff talk with Adrian Wojnarowski, he's telling you that a lot of these guys don't even get to free agency anymore, or at least free agency isn't what it used to be. Because once you draft these players, if they're good enough, then there is a lot of team control to have the upper hand at keeping them in the building, which is nice, especially with our own GM for quite some time and Mitch Kupchak telling us that hitting in the draft is really the only source of making this team better. So I like putting emphasis on the draft while also exploring other ways to improve the team. And I expect that to happen because we saw it during his time in Brooklyn. No, he wasn't the lead dog there. That was Sean Marks, but still being there and being so helpful from his reputation. Yeah, I'm hoping that he finds that happy medium while also putting an emphasis on the draft. Hiring somebody immediately in the scouting department, that makes sense to me. So some familiarity. I like bringing guys in that you've worked with in the past. And some people will say, oh, well, maybe he's just hiring a yes man. You can't hire all these familiar faces, nepotism. Yet one, I'm cool with this. I want my guys to be on the same page. This has always been a disconnect for me and some other people and other fans that might view it as, oh, I want a diversity of thought. Well, that is borrowing a phrase directly used from Frank Reich. If you guys are Carolina Panthers fans, we can go with the bringing in all of the smart minds and everybody wants to be the head chef, to use the classic kitchen example. And it's like, ooh, okay, yeah, a lot of head chefs, a lot of differing ideas. They want to take control and it doesn't really work out. It feels like there is a direct line of communication. There is a direct hierarchy forming. And I like that. Good old fashioned business model. Sometimes we need to learn from that. Sometimes we need to progress from that. But also, I like having a clear line of communication. You have your co-owners. Hopefully, they're going to let the basketball guy do the basketball thing with consultation from them. I know people were a little worried about that comment, but that's just the way of the NBA and the business. I'm hoping they allow Jeff Peterson to still be the driving force as chief basketball decision maker, which is what I expect. And then Jeff Peterson relying on his guys like a Dotun Akinwale, who comes from a scouting background and has had some success with the Atlanta Hawks. That will allow us to serve as a transition into if the Charlotte Hornets are really just becoming the Atlanta Hawks. And if they are becoming the Atlanta Hawks, do we like that? Is that something that you want to do? We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. Kyle Anderson is on here. Karl Anthony Towns, future uncertain, had surgery, I believe. So Anderson will see a larger role and will likely start. Just beware that the Wolves play 2 games only next week. I love this because I can't help but think Eric Collins is somewhere listening to this podcast. If you are, 1, we love you, EC. 2, please don't slowly close your laptop and walk away from your device, however you're listening to this pod, because I said something nice about slow-mo. It is hilarious. Every time the Hornets play Minnesota, he's got something to say about Kyle Anderson. When he was with Memphis, yep, same thing. loves criticizing that guy, and I am here for all of it. I'm here for it. EC, we love you. A couple of other interesting players. One current Hornet, Vasa Micic, is on this list. Josh Lloyd tells you as long as he's a starter, Micic is a solid add for fantasy with his assist highly valuable. Not only do you have a current Hornet, you also have a former Hornet, Kyle Lowry. Okay, like kind of former Hornet. With DeAnthony Melton still sidelined, Nick Nurse has been leaning on one of his old veterans, and Lowry has been surprisingly useful. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. So, with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or you get your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply. So, do you like it if the Charlotte Hornets are really just becoming the Atlanta Hawks? Is that something that you're okay with? So let's take a look at how the Hawks have built their team over the past few years. If you look at, let's just go to their draft history, right? Because that's something, okay, if Jeff Peterson was a part of that for quite some time, going to the Brooklyn Nets organization in 2019, and now you're going back to the Hawks, hiring Akinwale, who had been a part of that scouting department since 2015, 2016, then how have the Hawks operated since then? Well, if you look at their draft history, some of the hits that they have, John Collins falling all the way to 19. Loved that pick then. That was somebody that they hit in 2017. Then you go to 2018, and that was an interesting draft because 2018 was the draft that Dallas wanted to get Luka Doncic so badly that they gave up a lot to move up and go select him. And yeah, you it's a miss, right? If you're the Hawks, then you just stay there and you select Luka Doncic for sure. But if you do trade back, I like the process a little bit because you get some assets in return and you still select an all NBA caliber player in Trae Young. So, yeah, like there are problems with Trae. He's not Luka. He's not in the same stratosphere. I get it. But I like the process, to be honest with you. You didn't hit on it, but I like the process. You get some talent, you get some assets in return. You also draft Kevin Huerter at 19. That's someone that gets to a second contract. Another franchise valued him enough to go pay him a decent amount of money in Sacramento. And while, yeah, he's had an up and down season, Kevin Huerter, I would still call a hit at number 19. You move on. Not a great year in 2019 where you had 2 top 10 picks and you didn't hit on any of them. So that one's a bad one. And I should say Jackson Hayes actually goes to New Orleans. And so, yeah, that was the pick. They get Cam Reddish, who I loved, to be honest with you. Like, this is a little bit of hindsight for me because at the time I loved Cam Reddish and, everybody's giving him a shot because of how talented he is. And that dude is a myth in high school basketball. Like, everybody talks about how he was the toughest dude to defend ever in high school basketball. Anyways, he missed, but I like that thought process from the Hawks. The other picks I would say are hits, and we'll see how they roll. Onyeka Okongwu at number 6. We'll see. Like, we're still trying to get to another level with him. I really liked him in that LaMelo Ball draft, by the way, in 2020. But I like Onyeka Okongwu. I would still say that's a hit. Jalen Johnson maybe took a little bit, but man, Jalen Johnson has been fun for them. I mean, Hawks fans would point to him as a positive when what is overall a disappointing season. And then, of course, AJ Griffin. He's somebody that needs to step it up a little bit. And the other guy I didn't mention just because it's not here on the draft history, because I guess technically he wasn't drafted by them. It's the weird rule where they don't announce the draft picks to their team until the trades is finalized. Anyways, DeAndre Hunter. This is where we can get to another part of the process for the Hawks, where their draft, I think, for the most part, it's polarizing. I like it. Perhaps it's because they've selected players that I liked coming out of the draft, and so I'm willing to accept that. Like, I liked Amari Spellman at 30. Didn't work out, but I liked him. Sharif, man, at 48, you absolutely take a shot at that guy who was supposed to be a first-round pick before he had a bad shooting season, and I forget what else hurt Cooper falling down in that process. But man, I liked Sharif Cooper. Yeah, I mean, taking a stab at him, absolutely. So if you start to get to the other part of the process, though, I think you look at free agency where, yeah, they gave DeAndre Hunter a lot of money. Questionable decision. If you look at some of the other decisions they made, maybe via the trade market, they made a big one for DeJounte Murray because they were going after it. It was a weird fit at the time. I remember the discourse surrounding the DeJounte Murray trade being hesitant for both teams. In fact, I remember quite a few NBA analysts telling you that, oh man, I don't like it for either team. I'd rather have DeJounte Murray with San Antonio, even if they collect some assets from the Hawks. Like, I get it, but DeJounte Murray and Trae Young in the same backcourt, I know what they were trying to do. They were trying to counter the deficiencies defensively that Trae Young brings to the table with DeJounte, who's a very good defender. But how are they going to work offensively? And yeah, it's not been a great fit. To now we're having constant discussion about which one of those guys are you going to trade. You're going to make the big one and move on from Trae Young, or are you going to make something smaller and trade DeJounte Murray to the Lakers or whoever is the rumored team at the time? So yeah, there've been some questionable moves from them. But again, I keep going back to the thought, and while they haven't hit on everything, I do like the fact that you have a good mix of exercising everything you can to make your team better. Hey, we got to the Eastern Conference Finals. We had an epic series against Philadelphia, and we won. And that was because we had a bad dude in Trae Young who led the way. We had a star. We put enough around him to beat what was a superior team at the time. Even if Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, the fiasco, passing up on a dunk, yeah, it's all horrific for Philadelphia, right? But still, got to give the Hawks credit in what they were able to accomplish. So, okay, you have that success. No, it's not sustained, and that's an issue. But I like that you have a good mix of trying to get better through the trade market, trying to get better through the draft and hitting on some guys, trying to get better through free agency. You know, they give some of their guys that second contract, at least keeping what you think is internal talent in the system, which I love. Hello, love that. If you hit on guys, I hate watching those players leave. And we've seen that too much from Charlotte because they kind of have to in some situations because they're not really hits yet. So we'll just let them move to a different team, not going to pay them. And then with some of the guys that are pretty good or what you would call a success as a first round pick, or if you did a redraft, you'd probably just select them again. It's nice to get value from those guys if you trade them. You know, PJ Washington comes to mind. You got a lot of value there. But I also want to keep these guys that we draft and then have them stick around for more than 4 years and get to the next level. And while the Hawks are trying to have that sustained success after getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, I like that you have a big mix. And so the question is, do we think the Hornets are becoming the Hawks? Well, you have Rick Schnall, who was a minority owner with the Hawks for quite some time. You have Jeff Peterson, who was in the organization for quite some time. And Peterson is going back to that franchise to get an assistant GM. So, yeah, this is what we can try to evaluate. What has Atlanta done? Do we want to see that done here? We've used them as an example a lot over the last couple of years, right? Hey, star point guard, offensive-minded, and LaMelo. Okay, can we just build around that guy and have some success getting to the postseason? Smaller market in a way of basketball interest. Atlanta's not a small market, but you get the idea. Just as far as basketball interest goes, you know, it's not LA, it's not Boston. Yeah, maybe the Hawks. Maybe that's the blueprint that we follow. Well, they were listening, folks. They were listening. And they just decided, you know what? Let's just go get a bunch of dudes from that organization and move it up a few hours up I-85. We'll figure out if that is a good strategy for the Hornets or not. But it's going to be like that either way, no matter how you slice it. We'll continue on with Locked On Hornets in just a moment. But first, I wanted to tell you all about LinkedIn. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals. And LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. And LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. In fact, 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, as always, we appreciate LinkedIn and all of our partners for helping out with the Locked On Podcast Network. So, I said I would talk about the upcoming schedule yesterday, and then I just got carried away with the mailbag. I got carried away with Jeff Peterson and all of the takeaways from the presser, from all of the platforms, the podcast. He was a busy man after being introduced as the new EVP. So I tried to consolidate all of that because I didn't play any, but all the comments as much as possible in order to give you an episode. So here is the upcoming schedule for the Charlotte Hornets. They have a game against the Washington Wizards on the road tonight. They're back at home, back at home Saturday against Brooklyn. And then they hit the road a couple more times, once against Detroit and then once against Memphis before they come back home at the Spectrum Center on March 15th. So if we just go with those next 4 games, this is where, if you care about salvaging any momentum at the end of the season, with Jeff Peterson calling this, small sample, but better than no sample size, then you want to give Jeff Peterson something positive to evaluate, right? Like, these guys are still playing for something. We'll see about LaMelo. Who knows if he comes back? I think he does, based off what we heard from Steve Clifford in his interview with us on Wes and Walker. But who knows, man? So Brandon Miller, you would like to have some momentum for him going into next season. 20 games is enough for you to either stagnate, I guess, stall out, or move up or down. Hopefully it's not going down for Brandon Miller, as he still has a lot of responsibility offensively. But think about the other guys, right? Like Trey Mann. Those guys are going to be fighting for minutes in the backcourt next season, especially when you put LaMelo Ball back into the fold. And also, what about Nick Smith Jr.? Is there any opportunity for him to get playing time with Seth Curry out for what I would imagine is quite a while? We saw him in a boot at Spectrum Center. Same thing with Cody Martin. So with those guys playing more so in the backcourt, Nick Smith Jr., you're going to have another shot at this, man, or there's a very good likelihood that you will. So, okay, you guys are playing for something. These next 4 games, 3 on the road, but competition is not great. I'd at least like to see 2-2, right? Like I'd like to see 3-1. I mean, think about it. Even if you're on the road, I get it. Washington and Detroit, the 2 worst teams in all of basketball. Man, beat those teams. Beat those teams. I know offensively it's been a tough watch. Steve Clifford even admitted it, flat out told you it was not aesthetically pleasing, their game the last time out at the Spectrum Center. Yeah, it wasn't. Find a way to win those games, man. Bad teams. You found a way to do so right after the trade deadline. Do it again. Now, you have a bunch of road games after, so you're back home at Phoenix March 15th, and then you're on the road for Philly, Orlando, Atlanta, Cleveland. That's a tough schedule. You're back at home for a long time, but the schedule gets really tough. Golden State, Clippers, Boston, then it's Portland, Orlando, Oklahoma City, Dallas. Yeah, I mean, this it's imperative with these next 4 games because it is brutal. It's nice that you have a long homestand. Like, it's actually ridiculous. You have a 8-game long homestand, which is the longest, I think, in Hornets history, if I'm not mistaken. It's certainly the longest that I can remember before you close out the season on a 3-game road trip. Yeah, guys, this could get ugly for the last 20 games. What I feel like is going to happen is I'm hoping that they can come away with a couple of victories in the next 4, really go 3-1. Would love 4-0. We've seen him do it before. Hey, 4-0. I don't think that's crazy to ask for. And then after that, it might get ugly again. But this is where we're going to have to start to figure out what individual pieces mean to this team moving forward, because that's exactly what Jeff Peterson is trying to evaluate. So what are the positives that we can take away? We're going to be trying to look for that the rest of the way here on Locked On Hornets, and hopefully we can finish out the season strong. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Also follow me on Twitter at Walker Mail. I'll plug Doug's Substack, even if he's not here. Go read his work. It's great. Doug is funny and insightful. Every Hornets Boxscore.com. And then when you check us out on YouTube, subscribe, like, hit the notification button, all the cliches from all your favorite YouTube talent over the years. Do all of that here on Locked On Hornets. Have a great weekend. Hopefully the Hornets can show some positive things, and we'll be here to talk about it on Monday.